So our next speaker, I am so delighted to be able to introduce him. I had downloaded his audiobook. He is a fantastic author. I downloaded his novel Youth, and had just started it actually on the drive down to Dublin. There was an open day at the Irish Writers Centre, and talking about the novel fair, which a lot of writers here have been involved with. I see some out in the crowd. But for, I think was it half an hour, I think you spoke for, or maybe an hour, I can't remember, but it was just a wee snippet of advice, writing advice, and it was the most useful time I have ever. He just spoke so well, and it was fantastic. Listened to his book, and it blew me away. His name is Kevin Curran, I should say. He's a teacher from Balbriggan. He has 3 novels: Beats, Palatial, Citizens, and Youth. If you want to learn a little bit about how to write a voice, read Youth. Phenomenal. It opens in the line, "He speaks in your voice, Dublin," and that line has stayed with me from the very first moment I heard it. He has stories in The Stinging Fly and The Tangerine. He's a novel fair winner from way back in the day. Youth has been, it was reviewed by Roddy Doyle, who said, "Chilling and invigorating." I mean, to have Roddy Doyle read your book, it really speaks for itself. The Irish Times and the Sunday Independent picked it for Book of the Year 2023. Column to Bean, the column to Bean, picked it for Laureate for Fiction for Book Club Choice 2024, and it was featured on RTE's Book Club on the television. I'm very excited to hear him speak. Please give a massive round of applause for Kevin Curran.
Thanks, guys. Let's get set up here very quickly, if that's all right. Won't be up long. Thanks for the introduction, Sean. Have you got a lead for this? And I'll just hook it up. That's all right. Hello, guys. Hello for those who are online. Unfortunately, you won't get to see my kind of visuals, but I'll talk you through it regardless. I'll be all right. Yeah, you got a lead? Yeah. No, I wouldn't know. Just whatever lead you had. Whatever. Yeah. I'll take my watch off as well, Sean. Keep it back on time. Thanks so much. There we go. Nice. Here we go. It's still being dark. Hopefully this works. There we go. Yeah, it should come on now. Perfect. Okay, so it's hello to those online again. It's a bit mad. Hello to everyone. Once again, delighted to be here. What a place to give a quick talk. And thanks to Sean for the invite as well. We're going to start at the end. So we'll start with Youth, which is my latest book, my 3rd book, our most successful book. And I heard a speaker speak earlier, and I can say this is my best book, and I can tell you why the other books weren't as well when we go through it. But yeah, your talk was very interesting, and I heard so much in it. So I'm going to echo what you were saying as well. But this is undoubtedly my best book. It mightn't make me the greatest writer in the world, but I know for myself, I'm actually pleased with this, and I know in 10 years, 20 years time, I'll look back at this and say delighted with that. So that's Youth. But I want to go back to here to start with. This for me was one of my key learnings from writing Youth, and it's a random brushstroke. I always start every talk now that I give for writing with this. It's Renoir, my famous artist, my favorite artist, and it's just a brushstroke. And I learned this writing Youth, and I've learned this. I've been publishing books for 10 years. 2013 was my debut, but this is now what I start talking to people about, and it's what I know on my desk when I work is the thing that I return to constantly. It's a brushstroke, and there's the brushstroke there. It's simply a brushstroke right there. But then if we zoom out, as you probably know, this famous painting, you'll see there's the brushstroke there. And it makes me think about art, and it makes me think about writing, and it makes me think about what Renoir was doing and why he did that brushstroke. And then we zoom out further, and we go, wow, there's the brushstroke. Where is it? There it is there. So that makes me think that's the thing that I bring to all my writing now. And it is literally just a detail. It's a detail. And every sentence I write now in the third or fourth or fifth edit, every sentence, paragraph I write now is all about the details. And they're my details. And that's what makes my writing different from your writing, different from your writing. Not any better, but just different is the details that I choose to write. Renoir was doing it. Like there was no reason for him. Like when you look at the painting there was no reason for that brush stroke. He doesn't have to put it in, but he knew he wanted to because he needed to do the details that he knew would bring that painting to life. And if we look around the painting, we'll see the sun is obviously flickering through the leaves, and he decides to put that little bit of light on her forehead. But he did it here. He does 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 it all over. And if that one little brushstroke wasn't put on her forehead, it wouldn't make the painting any less amazing, or would it? Because we, the reader, and we, the viewer, buy into details. And I was doing it with my debut in 2013. I've done it more now, but that's where we push. Claire Keegan talks about the power of paragraphs and the power of the sentence. And I always thought that was mystical stuff and it was up in the air. But it's details, and it's you forcing yourself on the second or third or fourth draft to not say he walked into the room, because that's not a detail. How did he come into the room? And what kind of room was it? And then if you pare it back further, it just becomes adjectives, like literally adjectives. You know, like I'm a secondary school teacher, and I teach from first year. From first year, the first 3 weeks, 4 weeks in class, we go through adjectives, and we move from adjectives to similes. And it's from there we get the basis of good writing. Like we know, like, and I try and kind of get rid of the mysticism of books and like Joyce and the rest, Joyce. But if you pare back what he's doing, especially in A Portrait of the Artist, his sentences are detail driven and his paragraphs are detail driven, and it's the color he gives. Now, it's what he observes, obviously, which is the artistry, and that's what we have to think about when we're doing it. But that doesn't come, and George Saunders is the best person who talks like this. That does not come in the first draft, and you have to kind of wash away the idea of a first draft like that. And George Saunders, and the same with me, doesn't believe in writer's block. I don't believe in writer's block. Writer's block is you making an excuse for not writing something that you don't think is going to be good enough. It's bullshit. It's not going to be good enough first draft anyway. This book was 140,000 words down to 70,000. But to tell the truth, this book was 140,000 words, went down to 35. And in the last year before publication, went up then to 70. So out of 140,000 words, what originally was started with this, it came down to 35. The rest was shit. It wasn't good enough. It took me 10 years as a writer to realize that, and loads of rejections, loads of publishers telling me it wasn't good enough, for the penny to drop and then move forward. So those details only come when you push yourself. And that's when you're saying that getting ready for writers' competitions. I don't write short stories anymore because I don't have time. I just go for what I need to kind of prioritize. But that's in the drafting process, where you're looking at a paragraph and you will still impress yourself. Like up until, I'd say the day before this went to print, literally I was getting details. I was going to, this is set in a town called Balbriggan. I don't live there anymore. I live like 7 kilometers away. I was getting in my car that night before sending send on the last for this to check the traffic light button on the square in Balbriggan. Now, I didn't need to do that, but I wanted to do it because I feel as if I think it's really, really real, the reader who's reading this, and they're doing it, I believe, on the university course in Canada now, they'll be reading it thinking it's real. So I went, and it was a round silver button for the traffic light, but some of the buttons are different. So I had Google and they weren't giving me enough detail. But that's the level of kind of intensity I wanted to bring to the page. So that's what I was doing. So that's my start, and that's what I try and get people to think about when they're writing. Like it goes for all of, like, there's the same again. It's just a random stroke, but then if you zoom out, you'll notice it's still a random stroke, and then it's a stroke on her hat, and we come out, and there's the stroke there. There's on her hat. No need for it, and then we come out there. And that's it there. We could then zoom in on these two lads and say, well, what the hell is he doing putting in 2 lads? If we look here, they're literally over in the distance. But that is the artistry, and that's you pushing yourself to make what you see transfer to the page. And that's your details, and how you express those details. Okay, I'm going to go back now to the start to show you where I went right and where I went wrong. So we'll start at the start. So that's me. And what I say now is what's gone before is preparation. So unfortunately, I was in a lucky position to publish 2 books before this. But then again, I also think I was maybe in an unlucky position. Maybe those 2 books should have been not published. The second one, definitely, I personally feel shouldn't have been published. It's not good enough, but the publisher published it. So we'll talk about it when we get there. But for me, what's gone before is preparation. So everything I've been doing since I'm now 42, I've been writing books since I was 21. Green, 30,000 words when I was 21, in the middle of a master's in literature. So that's 20 years of writing literally made me get to this point. When I look through my writing kind of journey, it's 30,000 words of green, short stories you can see in between. Then I had a book called Dirge, As Bad As You Think It Sounds. It's terrible, 80,000 words. And then I had Beatsploitation. And that's the book that was published. I did the novel fair with that. And then it was taken on by a publisher. When I looked at my laptop after Beatsploitation was getting done, I used to tell people, no, I don't really write short stories. But I look back in my 20s, I wrote about 100,000 words worth of short stories in my 20s. So I just discarded. Never sent them anywhere, never did anything with them. But I wrote them because I had to write them. They're still on my old Mac, but they're terrible, but they had to be written. Like, they're about my granddad fishing, they're about this, and they're all full of symbolism and nonsense that weren't about the stories, weren't about the characters, and weren't about setting. But I need to get it out of my system. That's why I have ultimate respect for anyone in their 20s. Sally Rooney, like, what the hell, writing books like that in their 20s. For me, I had to purge the nonsense in my 20s. I also had a master's in Anglo-Irish literature. And I had to purge that out of myself because I was thinking of everything through the guise of an academic. And it took me my 20s to get rid of that, get rid of all symbolism, get rid of the idea of thematic nonsense, and bring it all the way back to adjectives, similes, details, character, and setting. Basics for me, but I wasn't doing that in my 20s. So then I had a debut called Beatsploitation. That's it there. It was based loosely on, I'm a teacher, so a student of mine was to be deported, and he was deported would have been about 2011, and he was from Nigeria, Bolo was his name, and they deported him in July. They did that on purpose because they didn't want schools. If he was in school when he was deported, we would have had a big noise made about it, so they wanted to do it low key. I was notified, and I went to a few meetings, and I found myself the only adult there kind of talking on his behalf. He went on the run, and then it became a big news story in Ireland, and he was ultimately found, and his mother and his sister himself went back to college. So I wrote Beatsploitation on the back of that. Foolishly in first person. It was a teacher robbing beats from a student, and the teacher was a racist. But when you put it in the first person, see, we're all fiction writers. We believe in the power of fiction. And like my line to people used to be, Stephen King is not a murderer, I hope. We can write things that we aren't, and you have to believe in the power of fiction to do that. But stupidly and foolishly, I wrote this in the first person, and I literally had a big review somewhere, and someone said I was a racist because there was no authorial disavowal. If we know what authorial disavowal is, it's what Swift used to put at the start of his novel to say, I'm not the writer of this. Gulliver wrote this book. So it's like madness. But that's writing, and you put yourself out there, and I put myself into the position of kind of a racist teacher living in a racist town, robbing beats off an African student, using those beats and then letting that student die. Now, I had an agent at this, it was the novel fair, so every publisher wanted it at the start. They all took it in. They said it sounded great. I did it on Saturday. Penguin were emailing me on Monday saying, can we have the full manuscript? And I had agents looking for it all. And then ultimately an agent said to me, if you change the end, let Kembo, that's the African character, let him live, or I'll sign you. And I said, no, I said he can't live, because Ireland at the time in 2013 was not a nice place for African immigrants. So I said, no, I stuck with it, and I signed with a different publisher, didn't get an agent, spent 10 years looking for an agent, but they're the choices you make as a writer. I sometimes wonder now, if I could go back 10 years, would I make that choice again? I'd say no, because now I've got an amazing agent off the back of this, and it is what it is. The book would have been a better book. The book would have sold, well, it did really well in Ireland. It would have sold much better. I would have got an agent off it if I changed the end. But then your integrity as a writer is something, the details, how we see the world is reflected in how we write our books. And if the character had lived in the end, it would have made a different impression on me and people for Ireland. But the book did really well in Ireland. That brought me to a light bulb moment. This is where, as in our writing journeys, hopefully you will get these kind of things as well. So you can kind of see it there, this light bulb moment. I was doing a talk with Beatsploitation with the editor of the Sting and Floyd, Declan Mead, and he just, a real throwaway pass. throwaway comment he said to me at the end of the talk. He goes, he says, you've got a real talent for dialogue. That's what he said. You've got a real talent for dialogue. And if Declan Mead from the Sting and Ploy, who's published Colin Barrett, who's Booker long listed, and the rest, you know, if he says something like that, you have to take this. When I was a young writer, so I said to myself, okay, well, if I have a good ear for dialogue, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write from now on as if it's dialogue. So I decided to do vernacular writing. So writing in the first person purely as vernacular. If Declan Mead said I had an ear for it, I said I'd do it. In between that, I wrote an article for the Irish Times saying I'm not going to write any more non-white characters. I said Beatsploitation was it. This was 2013. This article went massive, went huge in Ireland at the time. Taught me a lesson about how things, how dangerous online articles can be, because in school the next day or after the weekend it went live, everyone was talking about it. And it just shows you how dangerous like a little article in the Times can be, and it went everywhere. But in this article I said, I wrote Kembo, who was Ireland's first black character. He was. I know that. I know Colin McCann wrote a character, but it's based in America and it wasn't an Irish context. I said I wouldn't do it again because I said other people can do it, but we'll come back to that. So then I wrote short stories. So this is Young Irelanders. This is us. Right? I've only ever written 4 short stories in my life. The 4 of them have been published. 3 of them in the Sting and Fly, and 3 of them were longlisted for Oh Gosh. But that was all because of the vernacular. Here's Young Irelanders, and this is a character in 2015 that would become a character in this book. 2015, 8 years later. And you can see there's a lot to learn in this. This is Tanya, and again, this is vernacular. I'm not sure if you can see it, but like, I'll just give you 2 or 3 lines, give you a sense of what I was trying to do. But this is 2015, it's 8 years when the mistakes I made in this are still learners for me. So I only got on his Facebook once. He would always log out, but one day, he closed over the laptop and Mum came up and asked him for help with something, because he always helped Mum with everything. And when I opened it, like, he was still logged in. I was going to freight him, send loads of PMs to all the girls and put up a status like, I don't know, I love dick, or I wish I had a dick, or I just did a great shit. But then I saw the private messages he'd been sent, and I felt really bad for him, angry too, yeah, because I knew some of the lads messaged him and they always smiled at me or Mum or pat on my shoulder. I'd said things like, Sam, the main man, how's your bro? Full stop. So that's short story. That was longlisted for a Oh Gosh book award, a short story of the year thing. And it was great. It was me kind of finding my feet in vernacular writing, in first person writing, but it's a mess. And it was a reader of a friend of mine who's a good reader. He said to me, there's too many likes in there. And he was right. I wanted to make it real. I wanted to give the details of what I'm a teacher, of what I hear in my classroom. I wanted to represent how they talk on the page. But you can only do that to a certain level. This was 100% real. If you notice the sentence, it's massive and long. There's no breaks in it. There's too many likes. There's too many sub-clauses. That would be a teenager. This is a 15-year-old talking, letting it roll out of them. But then that was me finding my feet, and it wasn't readable enough, if that makes sense to people. It's the trick of being real to what you hear, but also making the reader comfortable with what they see. So that was the first one. That did really well. It was in a collection of short stories. Then I wrote Citizens. So here, this is why I used this. This is my second book. It was published in 2016, and I think it's not good enough. There's a number of things. First, the one thing I'm missing out on for this, I should have said, for anyone who's reading this was originally Beatsploitation was 120,000 words. It was brought, the only thing the publisher said to me was, bring that down to 90,000 words and we're good to go. So I brought it down to 90,000 words. Another publisher was looking at redoing it this year, to republish it this year. And I said, let me have a look at it first. So I looked at it 10 years later and I brought it down to 60,000 words, because it was a better story at 60,000 words. But because it was a debut, you put everything you want in it. I'm not going to publish it though. I don't think we should be going back and going forward with something new. But that just for writers, it just shows you. I had another, it was actually Colin Barrett's agent, looked at this book, and she met me at Colin Barrett's, his launch of Young Skins. And she said to me, I would not have read it at 120,000 words. Now, this is realist fiction. This is not sci-fi. This is not fantasy. But this is a major agent saying, I would not have read that on my slush pile at 120,000 words. Says you barely got in at 90,000. Now, it was obviously given to a boy, someone who knew her, kind of thing. But it just shows you, especially for realist fiction, and someone like that saying it's too much. She didn't sign me because it just wasn't for her. But that's life. That's rejection, and that was crushing. This one here, talking about rejection, 2016, I got an email from a publisher on the 23rd of December 23rd of December, Christmas, walking around the shops, and the email dropped, and it was a publisher saying no, and he destroyed the book. I still remember it was probably 2014, and it still hurts me now. And I printed off that email that he sent me, and I still have it. I have the email because I've never felt so devastated in all my life. You know, you just walk around with the kid, oh, email, and you see him. You see it, and just. I've met him since. Like, he's a good guy. He wanted to publish Beatsploitation. He wanted me to write it as a female, in a female perspective. I didn't think I was ready as a writer at that time. But that's the rejection. That's the agony of rejection. And I mean, I still feel that now. Like, it devastates me. Absolutely devastated me. But we have to kind of keep going. The book was rushed. When a book is not ready, or when a story is not ready, it's not ready. This book was published because it's a two-handle. It's a 2016 and 1916. And the publisher wanted to get it out in time for the centenary. Personally, I should have spent another year or two on this book. It's not good enough. And the public don't. It's like Beatsploitation, everyone talks about. No one talks about Citizens for a reason. It wasn't good enough. And in my mind, I kind of wish it wasn't published, but it was. So I have to live with that. But that's life, you know. But I could have done with another year or two on that. The importance of editing. This wasn't edited enough. It wasn't edited enough. Then I started writing more short stories. You can see kind of more short stories started to be written by me, and they were published. And again, it's vernacular voice, but you can see again, it's getting cleaner. So more English, like the mat to me, there you go, it's a simple full stop straight away. She made sure it's always looked after by giving me the main street, but once I asked for a change, she freaked out in front of all those old pea bags and said, I put my fate in those you the past years, Max, don't be a great little shit and throw it back at my face. It could have been worse, I suppose, full stop. It could have been on the hanging baskets with really good. It's still vernacular, it's still first person, it's still a teenage voice, but it's more controlled. It's me finding my feet as a writer and realizing what I'm doing and kind of moving on from it. So that was The Names. That was, again, I think up for a Borgosh. And then this one, Adventure Stories for Boys. This is a good story. I don't network. I don't really do stuff like that. I don't go to things like this. I probably should. I sent this story into the Sting and Fly. The editor said to me in passing as I was leaving, he said, Adventure Story, he said, that story you sent in, it's good. It's not quite there yet. He goes, he literally said it as I'm leaving the door. He says, give it another go and send it back to us. So I you know, when someone says something like that to you and then you work on it, like, oh, he said it. So I worked on it. I remember working on it in the kitchen in July, and they accepted it. And then a year later, they picked it for the best stories of the Sting and Fly for the past 20 years. It made it into the thing with like writers like Kevin Barry and the rest. It's incredible. But I had left that story. I'd sent it in and it wasn't good enough. He said, have another look at it. And I did. It's amazing when you look at what you've done and you start to find it. The exact same goes for this. This was rejected by Tom Morrison, the Sting and Fly, the Saving Tanya story. It was too big, too messy. And then I was asked to do it for this compilation, this anthology, and I made it better. So it just shows you, you know, I think there's a recurring theme for me. I think it's good enough, and it's only after a while I realised it's not good enough. But that was The Names. That was Adventure Stories for Boys. Again, you can see it's all practice for this. This is another teenage voice. This is another one in the vernacular. I pulled the yellow curtain behind me and I never noticed the lack of a swish. All right, I whispered soft because I was kind of afraid to disturb things. For one, I was on the bounce and didn't want to alert anyone to my presence. And two, the place felt like a library. You're looking good, Dad. Yes. So you can see I'm boring. I'm going through the same things for 10 years. I'm practicing. I didn't know it at the time, but I was practicing youth for 10 years. A first person teenage voice in the vernacular. Adventure Stories for Boys, I said it was put into the Sting and Fly, then they put it in the best of 20-year anthology, which blew my mind. It was amazing. And again, that was put up for a writing. But so that was me heading towards this. And by doing that, then youth starts to come together. But again, rejection is what it is. So youth was, Man's Gotta Do is a character. 4 characters in the book: Angel, Princess, Dean, and Tanya. Man's Gotta Do, and a guy got 1 was Angel. And it was rejected by the Sting and Fly, and it was rejected by the Penny Dreadful as short stories. In Chemistry is Princess. That's another character for this book. That was accepted for publication, and it was only a 3,000-word story. But by it being accepted, it's like, oh, it must be good. Now, the Penny Dreadful didn't publish it because they folded. But even by getting that acceptance, I knew that the character of Princess was a 17-year-old African-Irish girl. Someone had seen something in it. So I kept on it. So rejection, got me there. You cannot cheat writing a book. I thought I could. So because I'm a teacher, we're talking about being able to use time and having time. I thought what I'll do is I'll write short stories, publish those short stories in the Singapore and Dublin Review, have them all interlinked and have them published as a book. Doesn't work that way. It's not cheap writing a book. I wrote 11 characters for this book. 11 characters. 4 is what I paid. And all of those characters were different stories. Now, this was sent out. I had no agent. This was sent, but I had kind of made a name of Beastploitation, so I sent it out to different publishers. Publishers, the big publishers, came back and said, too many characters. It's like, no, I want to do this. And they all start saying there's too many characters. So then I cut it down from 11 to, I think, 9. Same again, too many characters. I cut it down from 9 to 7. Too many characters. And then I said, like, fuck this. At the very end, I was going to put it in the drawer. I cut it down to 4, gave it again to Lilliput. Lilliput got back to me the next day and said, can you meet me? This is Sean Farrell, who's the editor in Lilliput. So I've been writing this book for 8 years. 8 years, yeah, 8 years on and off. Like kind of coming towards it. And so the editor said, can I speak to you whenever you're in Sligo? I wasn't going to be in Sligo. This was literally in June. So I said to Sean, oh, it's funny you should say that because I'm in Sligo next weekend. I wasn't. I drove to Sligo and back in one day just to meet him because I knew that if you get an opportunity like this, I couldn't pass it up. I'd done enough time, especially with this book. This book was going into bin. It was going into bin. My heart was broken with it. It was going to bin. But I drove and then I met him. Hey, Sean, I'm going to my uncle's holiday home in Sligo, which he does have, but he didn't have it available to me. And so we met, we spoke for 2 hours, and Sean just wanted to know how I was, if I was amenable to not changes, but edits. And when by meeting me, and I was like, I don't have an ego. I was like, yeah, I'm good for edits, but like, within reason, as you know, I'm not going to say that the character in Beastploitation is going to live within reason. So the next day he emailed me, said, yeah, we're signing it. And on the back of that then, for that summer, we reworked book in certain ways I'm going to talk to you about in a second. And I got an agent off the back of that, which is amazing. Talking about modern Irish stories, there are no stories in Ireland at the moment like youth. There aren't. Like, I'm not a great writer, I don't think I'm a great writer. I don't think I'm the world's best writer. But I know I have an insight and I can give details into things that no one else in this country can see. I teach in Balbriggan Community College. I'm from Balbriggan. The classroom in front of me like this would have 60 to 70% second generation immigrants in the room. So over the class of 24, 16, I'd say, in nearly every class would be second generation immigrants. Out of the class of 24, at least 12, 50% would be African Irish. This is what I see and what I hear every day. I teach. I'm from Balbriggan. I went to that same school. I've seen the changes with attitudes to race in that school. And Balbriggan is literally Ireland's youngest town. It's one of Europe's youngest towns. And it's Ireland's officially most diverse town. So what I'm seeing and what the line I give to people when I talk is Balbriggan is Ireland's future now. It literally is. And how we deal with it and how the kids talk is something new. And that's why when I said I wasn't in 2013 going to write about this kind of world again, I had to come back to it because no one was writing it. Malatu, who's a good friend of mine, she lives in Balbriggan, wrote this Hostile Life. It's the only book that really covers a kind of an African-Irish perspective experience in Ireland. So I said to myself, well, I can't in 10, 20 years' time have someone say to me, you were a writer working in Balbriggan and you didn't think of writing about the kids in front of you. And I couldn't say, I was afraid of getting abuse on Twitter or being seen as this or that. I said, yeah. So I wrote it. And I needed, this is again, talking about we're not going to make millions, but I needed this book to be published for a number of reasons that we'll talk about now in a second. I didn't see this book. The class in front of me, we were reading books like Of Mice and Men and other books. And they always, and especially with a class that is 50% Black Irish, it was always in the American South, racist, not civil war, kind of slavery perspective. It was always hanging in the background, which is not the Dublin Irish perspective of race at the moment. And I wanted to express that through a book. So I felt as if this needed to be written. So they were the books kind of I had. There was nothing in an Irish perspective to do it. So that's then I decided to go with the 4 characters. And the 4 characters ended up being Angel, Tanya, Dean, and Princess. And that's it. They were the 4. Angel is 18 Congo Irish. Tanya is 16 Irish, White Irish. Dean is 17, and Princess is 17 Nigerian Irish. If you wanted to do characters like that, for this book especially, I wanted to think about this. I wanted to think about the page. Sorry. What does your perfect page look like? What does the page you read every day look like? How is information given to you, and how do you absorb stories? Colin Barrett said something in a Paris Review interview that stuck with me years ago. He said that when he reads books, he flicks ahead just to see the breaks for dialogue. And it was like a light bulb going off in my head, and I went, wow, because someone else was saying it. I do not like, that kills me. That's a page from Middlemarch. I can't do it. I'm not able for that anymore. And I don't think a lot of people are. In the year 2024, that's not how fiction looks. We don't, for me, that's not our reading habits anymore. We don't read like that. No one reads books. So like, obviously, I workshop. When I'm in a classroom, we read books. Like we read a lot of books, all the books, Gatsby, Room, Spin in the Park with Mice and Men. With 24, 30 kids in front of me, we read these books out loud. So I get a sense every year to workshop how people react to books. How do we react to pages? How do we react to dialogue? And it's undoubtedly, and you know yourself, especially reading something like Roddy Doyle's Commitments, it's dialogue that does a lot of the heavy lifting. It does. Middlemarch was written 200 years ago when there was no Google and there was no access to the English countryside for readers in Ireland, or readers in Newcastle, or readers in America. So the writer had to give us pages of description of the places. They don't have to do it now. Let's be real. And for me, this is only me talking. Obviously, the details, as I said, are important, but Google is there. And everyone here is a reader. I'm a reader. We Google as we read, especially on Kindle. I don't have a Kindle, I believe. But people, as they're reading, they go and get other resources. You don't need to give big swathes of description. So for me, the page was something I wanted to think about, especially in a modern context. And we're talking about Irish stories. So then I started to look at, that's Princess. Here's a page for Princess in the book. That's how she looks. So then this is a page of Tanya. That's how Tanya looks. Sorry, you can't really see it there. So for me, it was dialogue heavy. She wrote her pieces through internet posts. That's how she spoke. That's how her chapters are. People then Googled the songs that I put in, and then the songs would accompany each kind of short chapter. I didn't think people would be Googling the songs, because some of the songs, like this one here, what? Don't know about it. Crazy shit. But like they were. But that's the way I wanted. But this was taken from me from other writers. Like there's Max Porter, Grief Was a Thing with Feathers, or Is a Thing with Feathers. There's George Saunders. There's Kevin Barry. People are doing this. The page, think about the page and how you are given the page. Like I'm reading right now, Paul Murray's The Bee Sting. I'm on page 440. I've given myself to it as a reader. I could have read 3 books in that time. So the payoff better be good. I don't know, I'm 200 pages from the end. But it's a risk you take when you're a writer. You make decisions on what you want your reader to enjoy. In the back of my mind when I was doing this, I was thinking of my students in my class, how they enjoy books and would they read this book. And I knew that if I gave them that kind of page, they wouldn't read it. There's talk of this going on the Leaving Cert. I don't know if it will, but I know a lot of schools are doing it already as a TY book. So a lot of schools are reading this. Now, it wasn't YA. It's not YA. If you know it, it's definitely not YA. But it's readable. And that's what I was thinking about when I was doing it. Okay, to finish up then, that's just my ideas on the page. Simple as that. So we went to 4 characters. And I want to talk about the characters. Yeah, the characters were just modern Ireland in a nutshell. And because it was vernacular writing, I just wanted to see how the page looked. We talked about how the page looked, and we talked about how the characters spoke. Yeah, that's vernacular. I'm not going to lie. I never thought to he's doing track plays, boy would be banging like that. Yeah, he's got bare views on YouTube since the English channel. So that was me practicing for the year on getting that together. I was good enough or lucky enough to have students of mine who read the Princess chapter, because you're in murky territory when you're writing a character who's not white Irish. So Princess as an 18-year-old, and Roddy Doyle reviewed it, and Roddy Doyle said he'd like to read the full Princess book, a full book of Princess, which blew my mind. I'm 42, writing a 17-year-old Nigerian Irish girl. And one of the reviewers said, I'd like to read a full princess. I had the three girls there read the princess chapters for me over a year in school. They go in and read it and just giggle and laugh and think I'm a weirdo because they're like, how do you know all this? But when you're in a classroom, you hear people talk and you observe. That's the other thing. If you're looking for details, you've got to observe. You have to observe. And the vernacular. Yeah, the audiobook then was done with four amazing actors. Someone like the most gratifying thing for me was someone like Florence Arabambo. That's Florence. She's an actress. She's in a number of films. She did the princess chapters. She said when she was given the script, she'd never read anything like it before. She's done a number of RTE series, but in the RTE series, she's always an asylum seeker or a refugee. She said she'd never read anything that addressed just a Black Irish experience, walking the streets as a person, not looking for asylum, but they're, in my mind and in the book, these kids are born in Ireland. Like it's like, you know, in my mind, they're 17. So 2005 is their date of birth. They've grown up in Balbriggan. They've gone to the same primary school as me. They've gone to the same secondary school as me. They just so happen to be Black and have parents that aren't from Balbriggan. But they need to have the stories. It's funny that I was inside with Wandering Rocks. This book was going to be called Wandering Rocks because for me, it was all about movement and walking the streets and having people having space on the street. I wanted to give the pages space for characters who were not white to walk the streets of Balbriggan in their book. So that was that. So I just had great actors. And then that was it. Sometimes I talk about the process. I think that's going to be they're doing a new edition of this. That's the new cover, I believe. That was an old cover. They went through different covers and to make it something mental at the very end, the cover is that there. That is the cover. Nothing to do with me whatsoever, just serendipitous. That's Balbriggan. I walked that street all my life going to the train station. The photographer, they saw that photo, the publisher saw that photo and picked it. And I straight away saw it and said, that's where I walked to the train station all of my teenage years, which is mental. So that's it. To finish up, because I'm just about done. I do one thing when I'm talking to people, and it's on impressionism and details. And I want to show it to you here because for me, it brings it back to the basics. And maybe it's to kind of give myself some, to make myself feel better about what I've done for the past 10 years. This is Renoir. You can't really see it. This is Renoir drafting in 1885. This is Renoir drafting 10 years later. This is Renoir drafting 11 years later. Here's Renoir 12 years later. And here's Renoir 25 years later. So as an artist, he was doing the same thing over and over and over again because it was what he was interested in, what he wanted to express and what he wanted to draw. So I think it's making myself feel better because I keep on writing these type of stories. And then to finish up, and then again, that's him there in 1914. And that's near the end of his life. He literally dies, I think, 4 years later. But all his life, he's returning to the same subject matter. So don't feel bad if you're writing with the same thing and doing it. Because I have a new book now not written, like I write longhand. I wrote it this year on the strength of the agents ringing me saying, have you got a new book? And I'm a teacher. I'm like, no, so force myself to write just every day, at least a paragraph. And it's kind of something similar to this. So that's what we do. But to finish up, if you look at any sort of short stories or any sort of writing, you will notice always, this is, that's Chekhov. Character and setting within the first 10 lines, always. Chekhov, setting, character. Chekhov, setting, character. Like that's the basics. It's the basics. I did the novel fair. I read the novel fair. I was a judge for the novel fair, sorry. I read 100 manuscripts, 10,000 word openings for 100 manuscripts. I took notes. And the biggest failing constantly from everyone that was entering the novel fair, especially over in their first 10,000 words, was I took notes to learn myself, was you have to let the reader know immediately, number one, who the character is, where they are, and how old they are. It's fascinating that people forget that. Like within the first 10 lines, you have to, Claire Keegan says good writing is good manners. Good manners is letting the reader know, who are we here with, who are we traveling with, where are we traveling, and what kind of person are they? If you're a page in and you don't know whether the person is 60 or 16, you've lost the reader. So that's basics I like to go back to. I'd always go back to Chekhov just to finish up, to show you even Chekhov goes character and setting, or setting and character. Okay, that's me. Thanks so much.